your own camera.
I'm George Grider, Jr., and I'm sitting on the banks of the Mississippi River in Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm joined by my friend Bobby Berg, who I've known since I was a child. We grew up across the street from each other here in Memphis. And he's here in town visiting, and we started talking. And well, he was telling me about things that are going on in El Paso and about his daughter being on the city council. And I mentioned knowing a man named John Cook, whose son is the mayor. John Cook was a crewman aboard the USS Flasher during World War II. And I've known John for several years now because we have annual reunions of the crew of the USS Flasher around the country. And during these reunions we talk, and I've heard this story and I've read this story. You can find this story in a couple of books. One is one authored by my dad called Warfish, and the other is a book by McCants called The Patrols of the USS Flasher. And the story is that John Cook, my friend, saved the ship single-handedly, which I think you could look in a lot of annals of naval history and not find a story where a single man who was not the captain was responsible for saving the ship. This happened one day. Excuse me, you're seeing my dog who wants me to play with him, but this happened one day while the ship was undergoing exercises before going out on a war patrol, probably in 1944, I'm guessing, maybe 45, off the coast of Australia, Fremantle. They went out and were doing practice dives. And the control system went out. And as they were just submerging, the bow planes went into a steep dive configuration, which put the ship in a steep dive, and it was aimed toward the bottom. And the bottom wasn't that far down, and it was hard. It was a sandy bottom. And had it continued on down, they all would have perished. Well, normally what happens when a correction is needed is that the officers in the control room order, in this case it would have been all back full, which would have made the propeller go into reverse and stop the ship's downward plunge. And they did that, all back full. But the problem was that the electrical signals going to the electrical room, and there's another name for it, I'm sorry my terminology, but going into the room where the actual switches were, the signals went awry, and no signal went down there. Now that room was manned by John Cook,
Senior.
And he got no signals, and his job was to respond to the orders. That was his job. But he knew that the ship was going down, and so without getting any orders, he by himself threw the switch that put the ship into reverse and stopped its downward plunge. And I'd never heard a story like that. I think that's something unique to the submarine services, where men were trained to do just about every job on the ship and to feel a certain sense of entitlement and pride in their work. And so I've heard that story a couple of times, and I'm pleased to be able to tell it today. I hope you all enjoy it. And I'll tell you something else about John Cook, Sr. He once told me about his early days after the war, having kids, and how he didn't have much money, and he didn't know how, I think he had a lot of kids, and he didn't know how he was going to afford them, but he adopted this philosophy that there was always room for one more kid. So whoever's watching this, I don't know if you're the one more kid, but you sure have a fine father, and I'm pleased to be able to relate this story.